Legislative Town Hall. As you can see, we've got 5 of our 6 local lawmakers, our delegation to the Wyoming Legislature up here, and we're going to hear from them in just a moment. But first, I wanted to just make a few comments. First, thank you all for coming. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time. We will ask some of the questions that were submitted online, and then there will also be an opportunity for everyone in the audience to ask questions. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but there will be time for audience questions after that were not asked online beforehand. But I'm going to be the moderator tonight. My name is Jeff Victor. I am the founder and editor of the Laramie Reporter, an online local news source. And before we begin, I just wanted to have a word about decorum, because I've been to several town halls, and some of them are rowdier than others. We haven't filled this auditorium tonight, but I just want to say, everyone here tonight, all the lawmakers who came tonight are interested in hearing from their constituents, and the constituents, all of you who came, are interested in hearing from your lawmakers. So if we can just approach tonight with the spirit of listening and learning, that's going to get us a lot further. That'll be more productive. So just wanted to sort of put that out there before we begin. That doesn't mean you can't react to what people say. That doesn't mean you have to like everything that everyone says. But just wanted to put that out there before we get started. So before we begin, I did want to give everybody up here a chance to kind of make their own statement. I'm losing my place in my notes. I'm sorry. I was moving this weekend, so I was moving a lot of boxes and then compiling questions and then going back and forth. So I'm just a little bit disorganized, but if you stick with me, I do want to start with statements from all of the legislators up here. I'm going to give everybody up to 2 minutes, and I'm just hoping we can hear from you about what you're working on. Maybe you can tell us what committees you're on, what topics you're thinking about right now, how you're planning to serve your constituents right now. Obviously, we're going to get into a lot of specific topics later on, but I wanted to give you a sort of open-ended chance to tell us what you're working on. And I'll give you up to 2 minutes, and we can just go down the line here. So if we start with Senator Crum, if you want to begin, tell us what you're working on, and what you're doing this interim.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks everybody for coming tonight. I think it's really, really important that folks like us hear from everybody in the community. It's really important that we understand what the community needs are. I'm on 4 different committees. Still speak up?
Yeah.
I'm on 4 different committees. If you're in the back, come forward, please, because you're not going to hear us if you're not in front of the walkway. And I apologize for not having the microphones tonight, but if you're not in front of the walkway, it's going to be hard to hear. So I'm on 4 different committees. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I'm on Labor and Health. I'm on Select Water, which is the water rights and how our water's treated and how we protect it in the state. And I'm also on Capital Finance, which is all the state buildings and how they're financed, how they're maintained, how they're taken care of, what new buildings may need to be replaced going forward. So things that I'm really looking forward to this year. Number 1 is to protect our water. Our compact on the Colorado River, which is a green river basically in Wyoming and the Green River Basin, with all the states downstream, expires in 2026. And so basically everything's on the table. And where things are right now is most of the folks in Wyoming have water rights that are above those in Colorado and Nevada, California. And so we have, water rights that are better, which means we have first right to the water. California, Nevada, Arizona, they want to use the water, right? And we're not using all of the water. And so California, Nevada, Arizona, the downstream states are saying to Wyoming and Colorado, even Idaho's part of it, hey, you're not using it. Since you don't use it, it becomes our water, and you don't get it back. And our challenge is to make sure that we are using our water efficiently and using what we can, but at the same time to protect the water rights for the future of Wyoming. The water stays within Wyoming, and that's going to be a big battle, because a lot of times the folks with the most money win. Those states have a lot more money than Wyoming collectively. We're in better financial condition, and I really believe what our message is the correct message, that we have the prior water rights, and therefore we should be able to keep the water if you use it. You know, you can use it today, but if we need it 50 years from now, we get to use it. So that's a big deal, and we need to work really, really hard on that. I'm also really interested in rural health care. I spent the day in a neighboring community that has a hospital that's in significant trouble. We in Laramie are very, very fortunate to have Ivinson, who's financially sound, trying to get better. It's one of the top rural hospitals in America. And sometimes we take it for granted what we have here in Laramie. But the surrounding communities, there's an article that was written by the American Hospital Association that says they project in the next year or so there'll be 7 hospitals in the state of Wyoming close. That's awful for a community. If you don't have a school system and you don't have hospitals, you don't have a community. And we talk about economic development. You can't grow your community if you don't have a hospital or health care in your community. Right now, for example, the folks in Rollins have to have, if you're going to deliver a baby, you get to come to Laramie to have that opportunity to deliver your baby, because they can't do it in Rollins. That's one thing in July. That's another thing in February. Coming around Elk Mountain. So rural health care is really, really important, and we need to focus on that. Transportation is a big deal to me, especially 287 south of town. If we continue to focus on 287, I call it the highway of death, and I think everybody in this room understands why. And it's really important to me that we look at trying to figure out how to finish that 4-lane coming up. There's been significant reduction in death in where there's a 4-lane versus a 2-lane. And so we need to figure that out. There's other highways around the state that need some help too, but the one near and dear to our hearts is, of course, is 287. And so that's really, really important to me as we go forward. I'm also, this year, one last thing. This year, last thing we need to look at, this is recalibration for all our schools, which basically means we're going to look at how much does it take to educate one student within the state. And we'll look at that. I'll pause and we can come back to recalibration, but that's a big deal as we go forward too.
Senator Russ?
Well, thank you, and thanks everybody for being here. We really appreciate the opportunity to visit with all of you. As has been noted a couple times, but new people have walked in, we don't have a sound system available to us tonight, so if you find that you can't hear, please come down to the front and don't be shy or bashful. If you want to join us in these front rows, that would be fine too. We'll do our best to be projecting effectively, but you may not hear us, and please accommodate as you need. So I'm Senator Chris Rogers. I serve obviously here in Laramie, and I have served on the Joint Education Committee and the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee for the past 15 years. I also serve as chairman of the Blockchain and Financial Technology Select Committee. And this year, I'm on the Recalibration Committee that Senator Crum just mentioned. That is what I'll be spending an awful lot of time during this interim working on. As Representative Sherwood will tell you in a couple of minutes, this is a budget session. And along with the budget session, we have recalibration. So, as Senator Crum mentioned, we do this every 5 years as part of our school finance model, and we look to see what it costs to provide a high-quality education for the students in the state of Wyoming. And I hope all of you know this, but you may not. We have one of the best education systems in the country for K-12. We are incredibly blessed to have the education system that we have. When you look at statewide testing, as it relates to other states and their performance to what's called the NAEP test, which is a national test that's given to a random selection across all states, all districts, all schools. We perform among the top 5 time and again. It's amazing. We do that because we finance our education system well. We hire teachers that are exceptional. We make sure our classrooms are small and that we have the opportunity then to engage person to person between our teacher and these small classrooms. So this recalibration provides an opportunity for us to revisit how we fund education in the state, and Wyoming is unique in that it effectively funds education at the state level. Even though we have school districts that facilitate and implement the funding, we provide that funding from the state level and make sure that it's appropriate so that all of our students have an equitable access to high quality education. Well, that's up for consideration. We look at the model once again, and so we'll consider how we fund that model, and there will be some interest in the current climate and with the current legislature in cutting that funding, in reducing the amount that we provide. And you're all probably familiar with the discussion and the debate, which I'm sure we'll talk about, related to property taxes. That's where we get most of the funding for our schools. So this becomes a complex year for the recalibration committee to ensure that we have continued high quality education access for all of our students. And we'll spend honestly about 12 legislative days, committee days working on that, and then a tremendous amount of time in between. So that's what I'll be doing an awful lot over this off season, is working on that. This will be my 4th recalibration.
Thank you. And Representative Chesnick?
Thank you, Jeff, and I hope you all can hear me. My name is Ken Chesnick. I represent House District 13. Welcome to House District 13. We're here in my district. You're here. My wife and I walk past this building every day, every morning, because we're only about a mile away. But I'm going to be seeing a lot of Senator Crum this summer. I'm on 4 committees, 2 main committees and 2 side committees. The 2 main committees I'm on are the same ones that Senator Crum is on, Select Water and Judiciary. The Water Committee is really, really important because water rights are so critically important everywhere out west, but in particular in these times when the climate is drying up and we're in a historic drought. Water rights are immense. When the Colorado River Compact was entered into almost 100 years ago, they allocated water among the upper basin, the northern states, and the lower states based on numbers that they thought were normal. It turns out that they allocated based on a high volume flow, and unusually high at that time. So we're already over allocated, and the recent drought has made things worse. So we have a lot of work to do with our other states to properly allocate that water and make sure that we keep the water we need to support our way of life, our farming, our ranchers up here. But it's going to be a fight, and so we have a lot of work to do there. On the Judiciary Committee, we've had our first interim committee already. There's several issues we're dealing with there. The one that has piqued my interest the most, I think, is what looks like an attack on the court system. We have an excellent court system right now because we have a thing called the Judicial Nominating Committee. Our judges are chosen in a nonpartisan way, which is appropriate. Judges need to be completely nonpartisan and not bound by any party. And the way it's done, we have a nonpartisan commission consisting of 6 lawyers chosen by the Bar Association and 6 lay people, non-lawyers, chosen by the governor. And they receive applications for both district court at the county level and for Supreme Court. And they do a lot of work in vetting these candidates and then putting forward three names, the 3 best people that they come up with out of their vetting process for the governor. The governor must pick one of those 3. And those 3 tend to be well vetted and well qualified because the commission knows what a good judge looks like and they pick good judges. And that has been a great system and has worked very well, and we have great judges. There is a movement among some members of the legislature, I won't name them, but you know who they are, that want to put some political constraints, or to politicize the process to some degree. What that looks like remains to be seen, but we did authorize a draft of a bill that we're going to consider our next meeting that would add Senate confirmation at the end of the process. So it's a fairly minor change to the process. The commission would still do its work, the governor would still make a pick, but then that person would have to go to the Senate for confirmation. That's the bill that we're going to be presented with, which I am opposed to, but that's what is coming down the pike. You'll probably hear more about this over the summer as we work on that project. I'm not sure how it works when we have a vacancy in the summer and the Senate's not in session. How do you confirm somebody when they're not in session? I don't know. A lot of problems with the proposal, but the biggest problem that I see with it is it's the first bite of trying to make the process even more political. Changing from this nonpartisan process to a political appointment process is it's an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. This is the first bite. I'm going to be working to oppose that proposal and keep the process the way it is. I think it's a very good process. And so you will be hearing about that over the summer. And if you want to contact, you know how I feel, but anybody else, we need to work to oppose any change to the judicial nominating process. That's my main project. I got other things too. I'll pass it on.
Thank you. And Representative Provenza.
Good evening. I'm Carly Provenza. I represent Wyoming's House District 45. That's from 15th Street to the river. If you are in the back and you're struggling to hear anyone, I will not be offended. If you use this time while I am talking to come up, it will not bother me whatsoever. So please feel invited in these seats up here if you so choose. I currently serve on the Ag Committee and on Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife. These are two committees that I am new to during this session, so I am taking a lot to learn. But I will say that my priorities this summer, and has been in the past, have been public land access. So in specific, this last session I brought a bill, House Bill 99, which was access to public lands corner crossing. I am grateful that the courts have allowed for the people of Wyoming and the people of this country to access their public lands via corners. That is important. That is your land. That is our land that we should have access to. So one of the committees I'm on, Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife, will be considering public land access specifically in the corner crossing issue and whether Wyoming needs to codify or make any of that state law. I think the court did a good job of saying that is your land and you have the right to it, but we'll look at whether we need to consider state statutes that support that. Another issue that I have been trying to spearhead that I'm going to continue is medical debt. The cost of health care is, quite frankly, folks, too damn high. And it causes people to go into debt. And when they go into medical debt, that medical debt can be reported on their credit score, which keeps them from being able to access housing. It keeps them from potentially being able to get jobs. That should not, whether you can afford your own health care or not, should not be a barrier to you having housing or anything else, as far as I'm concerned. That bill made it through committee. It did not pass the committee, but it has bipartisan support behind it, so I will continue that. So those are the two main ones that I'll be looking at, but of course, it's incredibly important that we also look at maternal health care. I brought a health care amendment during the last the supplemental budget for $18 million to supplement our hospitals that do have maternal health care. That unfortunately died in both chambers, but the maternal health care we're having, we've had, I think, 4 hospitals closed in just the last couple of years in terms of maternal health care. We're at a point where people maybe can't give birth in Wyoming if we continue down the path that we're in. And I want Wyoming to be a place where people can raise their families, can have a good life for themselves, and that requires health care for themselves and their children. So I will continue down that path as well. And then as we have seen, there have been federal funding cuts. And so one thing that I am interested in is figuring out how can Wyoming bolster the programs that have had their funding cut? How can we ensure that the hardworking people of Wyoming have jobs? And how can we make sure that our communities are taken care of?
And finally, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much for being here, especially those who came with, questions, and we want to get to those here shortly. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I get to work on the state budget, so I get to hear from every state agency what their needs are to make sure that they're doing what they're required to do to serve you, our constituents. And so, being that this is leading into a budget session, most of my interim work will be on the numbers. And I love it. I think it's a great way to understand how our state agencies work, where their challenges are, where their successes are, and how we can support them so that they're doing their jobs in the communities. I'm also on management audit with Senator Rothfuss, and so that is the Program Evaluation Committee. I look at that as an opportunity to say, where is a certain program working or not working, and then make changes or improvement accordingly. So again, it's serving you, our constituents. And then my little historian heart is so happy that I get to work on the Capitol Exhibits Committee. So I was over in Cheyenne this afternoon, and we are working on an interactive civics lab for our K through 12 students. So when they come to the Capitol, there'll be things to touch and play with and watch, and games to play to learn about the 3 branches of government. And so I get to geek out about how we make learning fun for our K through 12 students while they're at the Capitol. During the summer, the Appropriations Committee will be doing a deep dive into understanding what resources our state forester needs. So we know that there was a wildfire last season that created a backlog of resources. We backfilled that in a haphazard way during session, but it's really just a Band-Aid. So understanding what our state forester needs to be successful in maintaining our forests. I think that's something we all enjoy, like our public lands. I'm also tracking how the federal cuts will impact Wyoming programs, and understanding where we have a mix of federal and state employees in programs, and whether we'll need to bolster those or combine or whatever creative solution we need. And this includes our forestry division, who works really closely with the federal forest service, right? So understanding how a lack of capacity at the federal level will put more strain on our state resources. I continue to work on affordable and workforce housing solutions both at the state level and here in Albany County. And then as we prepare the budget, circling around to that, making sure that we have resources allocated for healthcare, for education, to keep our roads safe, and to provide family and workforce services. So really, everything that I'm doing is looking at a lens of, these are numbers on a page, but these are real people. So when we put the budget together, what does that mean for my friends, my family, my neighbors, my community, you, the constituents? How will that impact your life, hurt or harm you? And so I'm always looking at our budget as what does this actually mean on the ground?
Excellent. So lots of important topics here that we're going to return to. We'll return to a lot of them. We won't be able to return to all of them. But now I want to move to some of the questions that were submitted online. We'll do online questions maybe for half hour and another half hour for audience questions here. But we'll start with online. If you submitted some questions online, thank you for doing that. We will not be able to ask every single one that was submitted, and some questions that were approaching the same topic, I've combined just for efficiency's sake. So if you hear something that sounds kind of like your question, that might be what happened. And if you do not hear your question, feel free to try to ask it when we go to the audience. I didn't just cut them out because I didn't like them. We're just constrained on time. So with that said, let's begin with, one more note. On the online form, we asked that folks tell us which legislator or all legislators they wanted to ask the question to. So some questions did designate who they wanted to ask, others didn't, and I will make that designation. Some questions will be important to ask everyone, but we didn't just want it to be every single question to every legislator, because sometimes that doesn't make sense based on what the question is. With that said, we're going to start with a question for Representative Provenza, something that you just mentioned actually. What is your stance on the potential sell-off of federal lands to private owners? How do you plan to support or oppose what our national delegation is doing to support these potential sales? The person who asked this question is specifically concerned about the loss of natural resources, loss of habitat, migration, loss of recreational spaces, and some other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably based on my intro, you know what my stance are on public lands. I feel very passionately that we continue to keep public lands in public hands. That is, our public lands are where people in Wyoming raise their family. It's where we recreate. It's where we hunt and fish, which we have a constitutional right to do. It is also where we make some of our money for the state of Wyoming and where people have jobs. So they're instrumental to Wyoming's character and Wyoming's heritage. If we were to sell off our public land tomorrow and we got to look at a bunch of subdivisions or only the very wealthy and rich could access those lands, that would really harm our quality of life in Wyoming for many people. I mean, raise your hand if you spend time on public land. Yep. Case in point, right there. They're one of the most important assets that the state of Wyoming has. It's ingrained in our culture and who we are. What we do on our public land, I mean, I don't know where else you can have just the ultimate freedom experience other than on our public lands. In terms of what I am doing, I mean, I will fight tooth and nail any state effort to sell off those public lands. Whether that's a conversation with the governor or getting a bunch of people together to say, we're not going to put up with this either. There's a lot of power in collective organizing and people coming together. All the people that raised your hand, when you're coming to your public lands, it's on us now to protect them, unfortunately. It shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have to fight for something that we've had for decades, something that has helped us. So I will be looking for ways that I can help people organize themselves to fight for public lands. I will look for ways to enact any state legislation that can help us protect our public lands. On the federal level, I'm grateful that the Public Lands Caucus has been formed, and maybe it's time that the Wyoming's Public Lands Caucus starts.
And our next question we will throw to Representative Chestik. We've got an election security related question. Ahead of the 2024 election, 89% of Wyoming adults said they were confident in their county's tally of ballots for the presidential race, according to a UW study from WISAC. In the legislative session that followed, lawmakers filed a record number of bills to remake Wyoming's elections. Earlier this month, a legislative committee voted to draft 10 more election bills. Is this a good use of lawmakers' time, given the high confidence Wyomingites have in our elections?
Thank you, Jeff. And first of all, I'm a little disappointed that the number was only 89%, because I think 99% of us should be confident that the elections system we have runs well. We have never had a problem with voter fraud in this state, ever. I think somebody found 4 instances in the last 20 years of voter impersonation, so we don't have a problem with it. And that's an example of national politics infiltrating Wyoming local events. Wyoming does not have a problem with election problems. I will say that I'm very pleased that we were able to kill a number of those election bills that were filed. Yes, there were a record number of bills filed in the last session. We killed a lot of them. The Senate killed a bunch of them too. So only a few of them passed. They shouldn't have passed. I voted against every one of them, but a lot of them failed. And so the 10 that are coming back from Corporations Committee are retreads, mostly, of bills that failed last time. So I'm hoping they will fail again this time, because we don't have a problem. Those bills are not election reform bills. They're voter suppression bills. Every one of those bills tries to make it harder for people to vote. Every one of them does. And for that reason, I opposed every one of them, and we were able, talking behind in the hallways and in the lunchroom and elsewhere, talking with, there are some members of the majority that will agree with us on that, and so we were able to find enough votes here and there to defeat a lot of those bills. And we will continue to do that. I think it's a waste of time. The Corporations Committee has a lot of good stuff they could be doing to help Wyoming people with Wyoming problems. And instead they're wasting time on this national talking point about election fraud, which is not a real thing. So, thank you for the question.
And this next one is going to be a question about guns, and it was directed to Senator Crum, and I'm going to start there, but I'm also going to open it up for other people to comment. But some background. This year, Wyoming repealed gun-free zones with House Bill 172, and we're seeing that take effect now at UW, at our local school district. Our online asker wants to know from you specifically, Senator Crum, why did you vote to repeal gun-free zones in Wyoming? You're the only one on the stage to vote in favor of the bill.
So, guns is a First Amendment right, and if you look at the
Second.
I'm sorry, Second Amendment. Thank you. Second Amendment right. Thank you. If you look at the statistics, and they're pretty black and white, where guns are held by responsible people in settings like this school, so a teacher goes out and gets a concealed carry permit where they've been trained, the data shows clearly that the school's much safer because the bad guys do not want to come in. Now, some people want to say no to that, want to believe something different, but the data clearly shows that the schools are safer and places are safer. That's a fact. And to kid ourselves that guns are already in the school, I've probably been in this school more than most of this audience on a fairly regular basis in the gym and the football stadium. All you got to do is look around now. There are guns, you can see them. There are guns in our schools today. And they're there, but people haven't used them. And we need to make sure that our kids are safe. And I really believe our kids are safer with concealed carry in the schools where people have been trained. Untrained people know this bill was put in place where you have to have a concealed carry permit, so some of the things, well, students are going to be able to carry. That is not true. They have to have a concealed carry permit. In the state of Wyoming, you need to be age 21 to get a concealed carry permit. I don't know of any student in this school that's age 21. So everybody has to be trained and have a permit. The data shows that you are safer if you have a concealed carry permit. And that's the data. And you may not want to believe it, but the data out there clearly shows that you're safer, our kids are safer, and there are less shootings. Where there's been shootings in school is when there's no guns and there's nobody there. The criminal knows they can come in and do what they want before the police can get there. So I'm for that. Back on a couple of other things we talked about here. Public access. I'm 100% believer in public access. I'm a lifetime Trout Unlimited member. I'm a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I'm a member of Ducks Unlimited. But I do think there's times you don't sell land, but we can trade it as a win-win. There may be some land right next to a city or a county that is being unused by the public. Maybe the city and county can do something with it. They can trade it for something that's more beneficial. Maybe a place along the river bottom that people can access, hunt, fish, versus a piece of sagebrush that's right next to a county. So I do believe I'm 100% for protecting our public lands, but I believe we can better our public lands if we do some trading back and forth. Back on election, just a second, back on election bills.
I want to stay on guns for just a moment, so we're going to go to Senator Rothfuss, our other senator. I want to hear from the other side, someone who voted against this bill. Sorry, there's a repeal and gun-free and against and for. Against this bill. So, Senator Rothfuss, why shouldn't folks have the ability to defend themselves at schools or colleges with a gun?
Well, thanks for the question, and this is something we've been debating in the legislature for many years, and I disagree with my good friend, Senator Crum. The data isn't there, and I spent a lot of time, obviously I've served on the Education Committee for 15 years. The Education Committee has specifically taken this topic up many times since I've served on it, and has not just defeated it, but actually put forward a pretty thoughtful piece of legislation that I helped craft about 7 years ago, which left it up to school districts to create a circumstance where if they chose, in other words, if their community wanted it, and that local school board chose, they could have some teachers with concealed carry permits. But what we put in that legislation was an extensive training requirement. A concealed carry permit in the state of Wyoming requires hunter's safety. You could have had it when you were 12. And you could be my age, 52. In fact, I did have it when I was 12. And I am 52. That's sufficient. You're good to go. You're qualified. Here's your permit. So when we considered it, we had law enforcement experts come in and talk to us about their concerns and how we could craft legislation that would address those concerns. So we did. We had folks from school districts, trustees that were terrified of this idea and were concerned about the additional cost associated with their insurance. And we listened to them and we made sure it was flexible. And then we had a small number of districts that really felt that they had certain schools in their district where there was no possibility of a police response. It was impossible. Hours would pass. So we thoughtfully prepared a piece of legislation that addressed all of those concerns. We passed that, and that's been in place. And since that went into place, I have not heard a single complaint from a school district person, whether it's a teacher, a trustee, a student, anyone else, because we solved that problem. This session, we threw it out the window. We threw it out the window in the favor of the one-size-fits-all. We don't give a damn what the locals think. The state is the power source, and we will make the decision from the top, and we will force it down. So whether you are a county commission, whether you are a school district, whether you are a city council, we don't care what you think. We don't care what you want for rules. And it's only in schools that you are required to have a permit, a concealed carry permit. So the folks up in the balcony of the legislature, for example, or the folks in your city council and county commission just have to have constitutional carry. And all you need for constitutional carry in the state of Wyoming is a belief that you're sane, that's self-evaluated, and a desire to have a gun where you're going. So, we went too far. And the last thing I'll say, Jeff, is there definitely were a lot of people in the state of Wyoming that supported that decision. But in every capacity, there were a lot more that understood that we should have local control and local decision makers engaging directly with their constituents in places like this, instead of the Wyoming legislature pushing a decision down upon all of you. And I know in this community there's a lot of concern, but I know in other communities there's far less concern. We took that right away from you, and that was a mistake.
And Senator Office, if I could ask you to turn on a dime and go to another piece of legislation. This is one that you co-sponsored, and this was House Bill 121, Hospital Pricing Transparency, which said it would have required hospitals to list prices for medical items and services, among other provisions. This bill, okay, I am going to ask about House Bill 121, Hospital Pricing Transparency. This bill said that it would have required hospitals to list prices for medical items and services, among other provisions. And I am asking about this question because it actually divided our Democrats on stage. Senator Office was a co-sponsor on the legislation, and so I want to start there. Tell us why this would have helped Wyoming if it had passed.
Well, I think this is a good one to bring up because this has become a contentious social media issue, and it seems to be a dividing bright line where if you voted the way I voted, apparently you're a good person, and if you voted the other way, you're somehow evil, and that's absolutely ridiculous. This bill had flaws. I was a co-sponsor on this bill. It was based on what Colorado did to try and improve their pricing transparency. So from that standpoint, I thought, good idea. I think everybody in here would like hospital pricing transparency. That's a general agreement. That's a good concept of a policy. They put this forward in Colorado, and it seemed to have a little bit of traction. So I co-sponsored that bill, and it was a bipartisan co-sponsorship. As it worked its way through the process, some flaws came up, some concerns came up that are totally legitimate and valid concerns. And this is the legislative process. The legislature was not ready for that bill. The legislature killed that bill. My colleagues here voted against it. I think they're great. I think it was a good choice. Do I support hospital transparency? Yes. Does that bill need more work? It appears so. And that's just fine. That's how we work in the legislature when we're being effective. And the fact that it's trying to be weaponized right now, where you've got some extremist groups saying, wow, these members voted against hospital transparency, is truly absurd. Truly absurd. And it's intentionally divisive. It diminishes the process that is the legislative process, where sometimes we don't pass bills, not because we don't support the concept, but because the bills just aren't ready. They don't do what they intend to do quite yet. They have flaws. That bill had flaws. Voting yes was fine. I thought it was going to be net better. I ended up voting yes on my final vote. Seeing no votes, just fine. The bill died. There was a reason it died. That's a fine outcome. So I just want everyone to understand that bills like that are being held up as clear, bright line flags sometimes are a lot more complicated than they appear just based on the title. That catch title doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. You have to read what the bill says. And so that's my answer. I did support it because I support price transparency at hospitals. I'm going to guess everybody here supports price transparency at hospitals. We disagree on whether we like the bill, and that's just great.
Representative Provenza or Chestic, is there?
I can do whatever you want. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll add if you miss anything.
Yeah, both Carly and I have been attacked by, there's mailers and flyers going around saying that we are in the pocket of lobbyists because we voted against hospital transparency, which, as Chris suggests, is absurd. It's laughable. Anybody who knows me knows that I got my start in politics fighting dark money and fighting lobbyists and getting money out of politics. That's my brand, right? But I also, when I was in practice, I was involved in a lot of litigation against hospitals about their pricing processes. So I know how they work. And exactly what Chris said, the bill, I'm in favor of transparency, absolutely. This bill didn't do it. This bill made things worse, I thought, and here's why. Hospital prices are the sticker price, what they call the standard price that they want to have, make that available publicly. Nobody pays it. Nobody pays it. Most people get their hospital charges paid by an insurance company or Medicare or Medicaid, and those are all negotiated prices, and they're negotiated way, way, way down from the sticker price. Nobody pays sticker price. The only people who might pay sticker price are those who are uninsured. It's a small number of people, but they're the ones who might pay sticker price. But if we show them, they're going to see the sticker price. If we can get them to compare this hospital to other hospitals, and how often you have a choice of hospitals in this town, in this state, you don't really have a choice because you only have one hospital nearby. So there's not really an opportunity to go somewhere else for a service to begin with. But if you're comparing high price to high price, that's going to anchor the high price and make you pay more than if you could negotiate a real price down where everybody else pays the lower price. So I thought it had a net potential for a negative impact on pricing because it's going to anchor the price too high and make it give you less power. As an individual payer, you don't have a lot of power to negotiate the price anyway, but if other hospitals are paying the same thing, it's going to take away your bargaining power. So I thought it was going to hurt people and had basically no effect and potentially harmful to people, and that's why I voted against it.
Did you forget anything, Representative Provenza?
One thing I want to add is, one, I'm ideologically opposed to making patients have to shop. If we want to reduce the cost of health care, then we should either cap what people pay, but most importantly, we should expand Medicaid. If we want to reduce the price of health care, 19,000 people right now could have health care. But we don't do that. And the people running those ads fight that effort. So it's a sham. That's all.
True.
Thank you. I want to make sure that we talk about property taxes a bit. So we're going to go to Representative Sherwood. The Wyoming legislature passed a 25% property tax cut earlier this year. The bill did not include a backfill to offset loss of local government revenues, nor a sunset date. Local government officials warned lawmakers against such blanket cuts. What have been the effects of the bill on the city of Laramie and Albany County?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to put a plug in for Jeff's story that came out this morning about the city of Laramie's budget. Super informative to go through and take a read and understand that the only reason the city is not having to cut services is because of the wind farm coming in one time, right? Sales and use tax on this. The city is able to make additional one-time investment in services. But we do have 2 county commissioners and a recovering county commissioner in the room and maybe more. So if I misspeak, please let me know. But my understanding is that the county is not faring as well and that there's a $600,000 shortage that the county is having to figure out what services get cut. When you look at the pie, the law enforcement, which I think we all benefit from, is 24% of the county budget. And so that most likely will take the largest hit. I'm not a county commissioner though, so, but, and that's just Albany County, right? And so we do see coverage. I think the folks from Sweetwater County have been very vocal. Not every community is having a windfall because of industrial or economic development. So Niobrara County will probably be hit a lot harder. So there's inequity across our cities and counties on how much this cut translates into services. I believe our cities and counties are lean, mean, closest to the people, and they're going to do their absolute best to deal with the crappy hand that we've dealt them. Sorry, I don't play poker. But I would encourage everybody to continue to pay attention when the county has its budget hearings or the city has its budget hearings and be watching and listening to what that means. Because if the property tax reductions continue, and on the ballot there'll be an initiative for a 50% reduction, that the wind development isn't going to save the city of Laramie in the years to come. So I like paying my taxes because I like being able to receive services when I call 911.
Do you want to add?
One thing, and you can speak to this better, but we implemented a lot of changes in the previous session that provided relief. So we have property tax relief, we have property tax refunds. So if you are struggling with your property tax amount, I don't know what I feel like the deadline is first Monday in May. But be in contact with your county assessor and the folks in your county government to help you figure out what programs exist to help you, because we implemented several laws in the last session that were meant to help people that were struggling. So I want to just validate that there are people who are struggling with the cost of their property taxes, but there's also a payoff. Most people, the average person in Wyoming gets $33,000 in government services that you don't have to pay for. There's a website called Cowboy Family
You can go there and type in your family's financial snapshot. There's like 6 prompts, and it'll calculate for you how much your family pays in taxes and how much services you receive back for that. So Cowboy family, you can do the math, do the numbers, and see that we are not paying our equal dollar for dollar value of the services that we are receiving, and that is thanks to the mineral industry.
Would any of the 3 legislators down here like to add anything on the topic of property taxes? Maybe what you would like to see in the discussions that are still happening this interim of what hasn't been done yet that you would like to see.
Okay, so property tax relief, or the relief, the 25%, it started at 50% during the session, and it was reduced to 25%. And part of that was there is a ballot initiative that everybody in this room is going to have the opportunity to vote on next year and decide what is appropriate for the state of Wyoming. Are we paying our fair share, as Carly said? I mean, you look at the site and you can see it clearly shows that we pay less than what we get in services back. However, there was a 21% increase for those who pay property tax in the last couple of years in Albany County. So your property tax went up about 21% with inflation. This takes it down about 25% across the board, which is not 25% reduction to the cities and counties. It's somewhere, I see a couple folks from the county here, they probably know better, but it's somewhere in the 12-13% that actually is the county's budget. There's many other factors that make up the budget. So it's about a 12 to 13% of the county's budget. You know, there's a lot of us, and I believe our city and county are efficient in many ways, but I look at, take my own personal household, maybe yours, maybe your business. There's probably 5 to 10% of what you spend money on that maybe you could save if you were looked at really what you're spending on. The cities and counties are spending your money, not their money. They're spending your money, and they need to be very efficient with your money on how they spend it. So we're going to get to see in the next couple of years how that 12 to 13% is really used. Does it really hurt people? Does it not hurt people? And then we're all going to get to see the ballot initiative in 2026 that we all get to vote on and say, this was a good thing, this was a bad thing, we get to see it. The other thing, no backfill. I was for the no backfill. There was many folks that wanted backfill, but the only thing backfill did was take money out of Peter's hand and give it to Paul. There's not a lot of slush funds at the state to move over here. Something else would have needed to be cut. And if the legislature was going to say we're going to cut property taxes, they didn't need to hide the property tax cut by moving money over. Everybody needs to see what the real property tax cut means and how it affects everybody. So we're going to wait and see. I voted for the 25%. I wasn't for 50%. I think we need to ease into it, let people see. We'll see what the 50% looks like 2 years from now. And that's going to be up to the voters, which is, I think, is a really good thing. It's not in the hands of 96 people sitting in Cheyenne or 97 if you throw the governor in. It's up to the 500,000 people that live in the state get to make the decision on what their property taxes are. So I'm looking forward to see what the next 2 years is. I'm very sympathetic to the cities and counties. They do a great job to provide services for us. But maybe like me in my household, there is a way to trim some fat off the corners and still do a good job. So we'll see what happens in the next 2 years and then what the ballot initiative does in 2026.
So I thought the bill was going to hurt people and voted against it. I think that our tax burden in Wyoming is very fortunately low, and that's because around 60% of the taxes end up getting paid for by the mineral extractive industry in various capacities. And roughly, and this is amazing, this is the only state that does this, roughly a third of our budget at this point in time is paid for by revenue off of our investments. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, we have $34 billion total in savings as a state. Not all of that provides investment revenue back to the state, but it provides for about a third of our budget. And that allows us to have incredibly low taxes, and we've enjoyed those taxes. But they did go up. There's no question that the taxes went up. And so everyone reacted to their taxes going up. But at the end of the day, it was still right around 1%, a little less than 1% in property tax that we were paying. The public was paying. And at this point, after the bills that we put in place, it gets closer to about 0.7% of the value of the house that we end up paying for property taxes, which is incredibly low. That's among the very lowest in the country. And that would be great if everything else were equal. If we could provide all the same services at lower taxes, of course we all want that. Who doesn't want lower taxes if we can get it? But we also all want services. We do want the police to show up when we call them. We'd like the fire department to show up when we give them a ring. I think we all like our streets a little better. I know driving around Laramie right now, I'd like some of those streets paved. But we're not getting that in the near future because we don't have the revenue, and this is where we get the revenue. This is revenue for the communities. So one of the things once again that we did was we made a decision on behalf of the counties and the cities at the state level that they didn't want, and we forced it down on them because, again, we know better in the state legislature than all of the folks in the community. This may come as a surprise, but Albany County could have lowered its taxes at any time. The city could lower its taxes. And they get voted in based on those tax rates, and everybody gets to interact and engage on a community-by-community basis. When we look at this 25% to the first $1 million that we passed, 20% of that value goes to Teton County. 20% of it. 20% of that cut is going to Teton County. And yet, we're all in it together, and we all end up suffering from that same cut. When we look at it from the state standpoint, it's not just a local issue. The mills are going to education, and that's what's paying for education. And we happen to be at a point in history right now, due to global events, where the oil prices are high enough and the gas prices are kind of mediocre high enough that we're capable of paying all the bills. But I have been in the legislature for long enough to remember times when we could not pay the bills. I don't have to remember very far back, trying to figure out how to cut education by $500 million. That was our task. How do we cut education by $500 million to balance the budget? Well, we just cut $100 million a year out of property taxes, and the bulk of that is for education. So as we contemplate moving forward, as I mentioned, I'm in this recalibration committee. There's practically a mandate. How do we cut funding? Well, why do we have to cut funding for education? Because we just cut the property taxes. And that's the reality of it. We love our education system. We love our police. We love our fire department. We really appreciate our roads. We appreciate our bridges. We appreciate the water that when we turn on the tap, shows up at our house. That costs money, and we just cut the money that provides those services. So I voted no.
Thank you.
Just real quick on a couple of things. It's real easy to say it's an either or. We're going to cut police. We're going to cut fire. We're going to cut your schools. That's a talking point. There's other things that can happen in the city. It doesn't have to be schools. It doesn't have to be fire. It doesn't have to be police. It doesn't mean your streets don't get paved. It's where is there excess money that needs to be spent. It's not, we have these talking points out there that, boy, we're going to scare you to death. It's not going to scare you to death. There's going to be things. It's not an either or. That's what I found in the legislature this year. People try to frame, it's this or it's this. In reality, it's somewhere in here. And so when we hear these statements, it's either or, that's just not true. There's something in the middle that makes it all work together.
Just a quick follow-up. We absolutely have to cut education at some point when we run out of funds. There's no or there. When our revenue goes below our costs, there's no alternative than to cut the costs, and that means cutting education. And we do have savings in place, so if the alternative is to spend down the savings that we've been building up to make sure that we don't have the capacity to resist a boom and bust cycle in the future, yeah, we can do that. But in the end, it does lead to a cut in education. This is how we fund education, period.
Yes, Representative Justin.
Very brief. I can't add a lot to what has already been said. I just want to emphasize a couple of points. I also voted no on the bill, and Chris said a lot of what I was going to say. But first of all, I voted no because it was sort of the legislature wanted to be the hero in cutting taxes, and we can feel good about cutting taxes, and the consequence is your fault, your problem. It's not, we don't have to solve the problem. We're going to cut taxes, and you, counties and school districts and cities, you figure out what gets cut. You're the bad guys for cutting the services. We're the heroes for cutting the taxes. And I thought that was terribly unfair. The cuts in service that were going to be required was unbearable to me, and I voted no. The other point I want to make, and Chris touched on this, the reason we have the problem at all was because of some gigantic property value inflation in one county. A lot of people moved to Teton County and were willing to pay anything for those, and the property values in Teton County were going skyrocketing, going through the roof. And there are people who lived in Teton County for a long time were suddenly unable to afford their homes because the property taxes are going up, because all the properties around them were going up because of the people filtering in from California and everywhere else. Not every county had the same level of inflation. Most counties had relatively modest inflation, but this is the problem with one-size-fits-all solutions. We had a one-size-fits-all solution that cuts everybody the same. Teton can take the cut because they already had the boom, but we can't because we didn't have the boom. We didn't have the giant revenue inflation. So the one-size-fits-all thing also bothered me terribly. There were some amendments that passed and then got pulled back that would have targeted the cut to places that needed the cuts and would not have cut the places that didn't need the cuts. But that ultimately failed, so I voted against the bill.
Great. Well, we've heard from everyone on property taxes, and I do have some more questions from online, and maybe we'll return to those. But I told you all we would give you a chance to ask questions in the audience, so I want to move to that now. We don't have a microphone, so you'll have to project, but we can kind of move across this way. So I want to start here with the red hat.
Sure, thank you. You said that the deficit for the county was $600,000. That's correct. Okay, that's per county numbers. What's the budget for the county? $18.5 million. What percentage is 600,000 of $18.5 million? 3.2%. Okay, so that's the cost. Is 3.2% at 25%. If it goes to 50%, it's not exactly, but it'd be about 6.4%. Not the 25% that everybody's afraid of.
Do you have a question?
The question is, I want to make sure that you knew that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. But again, when I talk about the lens that I see these numbers through, even a 3% cut could be a loss of jobs. And that has a negative impact to how services are delivered and to the health and well-being of that family in our communities. So yes, 3%, again, just a number, it's the correct number, but it's people, right? That's a lack of services when a job is cut. So
Where does that $600,000 go? It goes to our pockets. It's in the taxpayer's pocket. It's their savings. Okay? It's not like it's gone nowhere. It's a savings that goes back to the taxpayers of Albany County.
So we could collectively pool our savings to pay for the services that we all want or need, right? So either those services are collected through taxes and paid for, or we become much more generous with our wallets in supporting those services that are now being provided by nonprofits that are at capacity.
Okay. go here.
It's a great transition. I was going to ask about nonprofits. I work in the nonprofit sector currently. A lot of nonprofits in Wyoming are very scared right now, especially due to direct federal funding cuts, but also block grants and categorical grants that came from the state as well. How do you plan on trying to support nonprofits since they do a lot of the social services in the state?
Is that for someone in particular? or-
All of them.
Well, I can start and say I work for a nonprofit, and I've been doged twice now with my nonprofit. So we are pivoting and reaching out to our colleagues and doing a better job of breaking down silos, building collaboration, relying on each other, telling our story, letting our constituents, our community members, our volunteers, our donors know what the impact of those cuts mean. I think so. I'm feeling it along with you, and as a legislator, I'm trying to track every time there's a cut, what does that mean for services? What does that mean that we no longer have access to that has enhanced our quality of life or is part of our Wyoming identity? So I'm in this boat with you. I wish that I had a silver bullet that doesn't exist. But I would say just keep talking, keep sharing the why that happens when those things are cut back, and being transparent and being vulnerable. And then we all probably need to do a much better job of asking for help. Sometimes as Wyomingites, we don't like to admit that we're struggling, but we do need to verbalize and reach out to the other nonprofits in the community and our friends and partners and say, here's the reality of the situation. We're having to cut this. Is there any way that you can come and help me out here?
Anyone else on support for nonprofits?
So we have a budget session coming up, as you kind of referenced. I think probably everyone up here is going to try to look for ways that through that budget we can either protect the funding that exists or increase it. The unfortunate reality is that the politics are against us. The people that are in charge are not interested in ensuring that we have the funding for programs that are necessary in our communities. I mean, we're talking about sometimes even healthcare. So what our job is when we don't have the political power to change the minds of our colleagues is we have to articulate the harm. And when I go up and when I'm talking about articulating the harm, my goal is to get people in their communities to know who their representatives are when they vote against healthcare funding for maternity wards. Because you can't convince people unless you can replace them, unfortunately, is the political reality that we live in. And so the goal is to build enough power to replace them by telling the people of Wyoming that their representatives are not representing them well.
So I'm a huge believer in nonprofits, and I've helped fund a lot of nonprofits, spent, I don't know, thousands and thousands of hours working for nonprofits. So I'm a huge believer in nonprofits. And I believe there needs to be a safety net in our communities for folks. And there needs to be accountability with that safety net too, that folks help themselves, right? That it's just not a handout, it's a hand up, not a handout. And I think our nonprofits do a really, really good job with that, helping people lift themselves up so they don't have to rely on those services. I think what this cut does is it allows our nonprofits to become better than they are today, because it's going to force some of the nonprofits out there to tell their story to the community, so the community helps fund them a little bit better too. Remember, we just debated a property tax cut. Citizens in our community are going to have more money in their pocket because they just had a property tax cut. Then the nonprofits can go out and help get some of that money. I'm a huge believer in nonprofits. We need to make sure that there's a safety net for everybody with some accountability attached to it. That we help people up, not just help them stay where they're at, but help people get up so they can be helped, that nonprofit helps somebody else in the future.
All right, move on. Here, I saw.
Tell us about
Back in the hat, way back there. Yeah.
at the state level, understaffed state agencies already. I'm curious where you see the picture. I've been hearing about it for decades. Where's the fact? Where are we at?
Where's the fat?
Okay, where's the fat in the city budget? We just heard it's 3%. I think that's where the cities and counties, I go back to where I was earlier. I think it's a great question. Where is it? I think that's where the cities and counties can go look. If there's not 3% fat there, we're going to find out pretty quick as citizens, right? We're going to find out pretty quick that there's not 3% there. And then we get a chance to vote in a year, a little over a year now, on that. And we can vote not to cut property taxes, right? Because there was no fat. But if it's their fat, the cities and counties are going to do a good job now. I'm totally convinced of looking at where's 3%. I've still got 97% of my budget. Where's that 3% come from? If there is no fat, I'm pretty sure what we're going to see in the ballot initiative a year and a half from now. If there's fat there, then we'll know that too. I think this is a 3%. We're talking 3%. We're going to get to see where this is. This isn't the end of the world. This isn't they've been cut 50 or 75. It's 3%, and we're going to get to see where we're at. I'm really looking forward to this next 2 years. It's going to make us all focus. Me as a citizen to go to the city council and say, you know, you're debating cutting this service. I think it's really important to you. If the city council doesn't hear about a service, and they might think, or the county commissioners, they might think, okay, there's no interest in this service, we do away with it. We'll just see where it goes. We're talking 3%.
So shouldn't you have known what was going to get cut before you did?
Yeah, good question.
The cut, remember, the cut hasn't taken place yet. There's a chance for the cities and counties to work into it. I'm back on, we can debate local control all we want. Each one of us can use the word local control here and someplace else we didn't. But I really do think this is a local issue. We'll see where it goes. And we're talking 3%. If it was 50% across the board cut in tax, that's devastating. But this is not that. It's 3%.
Yeah, still.
Make sure we get a couple more. I want to make sure we get a couple more questions in here. Let's go right here, John.
I have a question about public lands. That's partially for Representative Crum. I'm sorry, for Senator Crum, and partially for Sorry, I'll talk louder. It's a question about public land, partially for Senator Crum and partially for Representative Provenza. So you were talking about that. Sorry, I'm really nervous speaking this loud. You were talking about that. I feel like in my gut, I'm like, I don't want public lands to go anywhere. I want to keep all my public lands, blah, blah, blah. But if you're saying that there might be a trade that would be better and it would benefit the community because we'd get money from it, who's choosing what lands are the like unimportant ones? Like who makes the call of the ones that you're gonna then trade? Mm-hmm. Are they just gonna get traded and then we're gonna be like, wait, we don't have access to that anymore? Or is there like who gets to decide that? I'm from North Georgia, so most of my public land is gone.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen here.
Yeah. So number one, I don't believe in selling public lands for cash.
Okay.
I do not believe in selling public lands for cash. But I do believe that there may be, through negotiations with cities, counties, the government, your elected people that you elect, the legislature, the counties, wherever that public land may reside, the schools, wherever that public land may reside, there may be a better use, right? There may be. I'm not saying there is, but there may be a better use for this piece of land here to do this and this piece of land here. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win. The school, let's say this is a public land right across the street here on Boulder Drive, and it's private, but let's say it's public. And the school wants to move there, but yet we could get an equal piece down on the Laramie River, expand the access for the Greenbelt. There may be a way to do a trade that's beneficial for everybody. I am not in favor of selling public lands for cash. I'm not in favor of just giving public land away. But there is a place for discussion on is there a beneficial use of this piece versus this piece? And I am pretty sure with the raise of hands, and mine was one of them, who uses public land, that there's not going to be just the outright giveaway of, I'm getting 10 cents, I'm going to give you $1 and we're all going to get 10 cents. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen because it's broad-based support for public land, but they're the place for the discussion.
Representative Provenza too.
Thanks. Question's good, and there is open discussion. So currently, Pilot Hill is a great example of potential for SWAP to figure out how can we ensure that we can have access to this large piece of land. There's private owners who might want to be involved. There's state land that might be involved, and there's federal land. And so who makes those decisions depends on the land that's in question. So in the West, we have large checkerboards. So the Bureau of Land Management has parcels that are close to each other, but you have private land scattered throughout. I believe Carbon County and other counties have done trades where they swap some of that land out so that you have a larger swath of public land that is accessible in areas. You also have private landowners who have worked to do conservation easements or deed their land essentially to the federal government for the use of public land, or even potentially the state. What we saw this session where there was a bill, I believe it was House Bill 118, the intent was to keep any land from being able to be sold or traded with the federal government that had a net gain. And that bill ultimately died, but the argument was that you had the private property rights to decide what you do with your own land. So we still can trade and sell off land to the federal government, which would make it public. In Wyoming, I think we're probably better at making those decisions. Our county commissioners can be involved. The people that are local should be involved, and you should have robust public hearings. The public should be involved in those decisions. There's been some contention about public access or public hearings when we've talked about that sort of thing, public land transfer. But I think to the point where we should not be in any business to sell off any of our land. We will not get it back. It will never come back to us. And so we need to ensure that we protect the land of Wyoming for future generations.
Yeah!
All right, maybe do one or two more. I think in the white jacket back there, you've had your hand up for a while.
Senator, in the recalibration, is there any resolve, do you think, on your committee to see that those increased dollars, and they're always an increase, they always have been, will go to the classroom? Because the fact that we rate fifth by this weather explosive little bit skewed sort of thing doesn't address the children that cannot read at grade level and cannot do their math at grade level. I think the Wyoming people are willing to pay for that. But every time that the districts have come and asked for more money, they do not come with a plan to improve that, and we're not improving it. And we're falling behind, particularly in young males, preparing for anything after school or making progress in that area. And somewhere in that calibration, I know that they can tell you the size of the administration. And unfortunately, chronically, we have had a very high administrative cost in Albany County. And there are some very efficient districts in this state who have almost half the administration. We're losing children in this state. So the numbers of kids in our schools are going down, so it becomes even more important that we use that money carefully for reducing administration instead of classroom services. Have you detected any resolve to get that done?
Yes, actually. In conversations with the other members of the select committee, that is one of their priorities, is to see classroom resources achieving the classroom, so that whatever goes to the classroom ends up in the classroom, as well as what we call ECAs, which are cost of living adjustments, external cost adjustments, what ECAs that are addressed to teachers ending up in the hands of teachers. That is one of the priorities that I think the select committee has identified to find a way to achieve. Now, there's a lot of complexity to how that's been done in the past through the funding model. We, on paper, fund classrooms in K through 6 at a 15 student to 1 teacher ratio. And then in 7 through 12, we fund at 21 to 1, 21 students per teacher. That's what we have on paper, and that's great. If we did that, if we could do that, it would be spectacular. But we unfortunately dramatically underfund the amount of money per teacher. So our funding model doesn't pay enough to hire a teacher to teach in that classroom, and therefore we don't end up with those classroom ratios. So that's certainly something that I've prioritized for the recalibration, and it sounds like something that others agree with, that we need to come up with an appropriate classroom teacher ratio, and then we need to fund the model as the first priority to ensure that there's enough funds there to hire that many teachers into the classroom and to ensure that the resources going through the district end up in the classroom. So that's probably the most hopeful. You hit on the most hopeful thing that I see from recalibration is the possibility of achieving that. Now, hopefully we achieve that in a way that's net positive, because I know there are some members of that select committee that would like to reduce the budget, and doing what you just suggested and reducing the budget, that can't really happen very well. But hopefully we can get to the point where we achieve that interest, because it's exactly what we need to do. We need to make sure that we're adequately funding our teachers at appropriate classroom sizes, and we know we'll continue excellence at that point. So thank you for that question. I appreciate you bringing that up.
I think we can do one more. Are you pointing at someone good? She had her hand up like 5 times.
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good. I just had one question. How many of you work in the nonprofit up here?
Work in a nonprofit?
At a nonprofit, I want you to raise your hands.
How about on a board?
I was on a board, that doesn't count. Okay, because what I heard, I've worked on the board, but I worked at the soup kitchen and I worked at Interfaith. I want to say, quit stereotyping. This little thing about, oh, and we'll get them on their feet. No, we won't, because we don't give them chances to get on their feet. When I worked at both places that have the nonprofit, there are college students that we tell to have an education. Get on your feet, and you have this humongous set of money and a low stipend. And you have a family as well. And your wife is working a part-time job if she can. Sometimes those people only had one hot meal a day. And that would be at noon at the soup kitchen. Interfaith. I really get so upset about this, and I'm just going to have to, I have this resentment, so I'm going to just get it out here. It's not drug addicts and a heroin addict coming through the door saying, I need bread. We've had people at the University of Wyoming who have full-time jobs. I'm talking custodians who work in offices, and they come in to get bread, milk, or whatever they can. These are people who have full-time jobs that have the insurance benefit, which is sometimes too high for them, for their family. The majority of the people that come there work 2 jobs. We need to take the time to look at these things. We have the data. Every grant of nonprofit has the data. American Studies worked with Trey. We were fortunate we have endowments that we paid independently from our program with our GAs to help Trey, help the soup kitchen, help other entities in our community. We have got to quit putting everybody in one pool. We are divisive. We are different. And we keep going to, you did the either or. We are in the or. Sorry. We have been oppressed by people making decisions that don't even know what's going on. I worked in the polls. I've worked in the polls for 20 years. I hear the most ridiculous things about voter fraud, and I just go, what is going on? None of that's true. We just got to find a way to unify and go across the table and talk about these issues where I don't need to hear all this, I don't know. I want it just across the table. Layman terms is where I'm going. No jargon. We just got to get across the table.
So here's the deal. You hit the nail on the head. 100%. I want to applaud you. I mean, our system is broken. It's totally broken. And you say it's either or, and you're right, it's either or. And it should not be either or. And we have to find a way to help people. We're not doing it now. I will agree 100% today. We are not doing it today. And we have to find a way. We can have a debate on how to do it, but we have to find a way on how to help people out, because we are not doing it now. We're keeping them down, and we have to find a way collectively as a community to raise them up. And nonprofits, what you're doing, you're a hero in this community. And nonprofits have to be part of the solution of raising people up and getting people to move forward. You hit the nail on the head. It's not either or. And I think everybody up here, all my colleagues would agree, the system is broken. We have to fix the system. So I applaud you. You hit the nail on the head.
And we need to work with our education, because that's where it starts, from the home to education.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. Go out in the hall. I mean, I agree with it, and I put my time and my money where my mouth is. Go out in the hall and look as you leave the building. There's a plaque. Who helped raise money for a $25 million bond issue on here? You'll see one person in this room, I believe, with their name on that plaque. You can just go find out who it is. This community raised $6 million more privately for this school and for other things with the school district to fund different things in the school privately, not public money, to make this school good. And find out who the chairman of that group was that did that. And when you do, you'll find out that I was the chair of that raised for the school. It takes public, private sector working and the communities working together to get it done. And this school that we're sitting in, these chairs you're sitting in today are an example of that. That we've got to work together. It can't be all public. It can't be all private. There's got to be a way we work together. And you hit the nail on the head, because what we're doing now doesn't work.
We're a minute over time. Can we do one more question?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, let's do two more, because we've got two more questions that have had to hand up at one time.
Yeah, let's do both. You first.
Okay. I'm concerned about education, and it's not that it isn't working well, but sometimes I feel like even more recently it has narrowed down more than it needs to prepare students for all their adult roles.
Yes.
And to have a preventive approach to helping to educate so that some of the problems we're experiencing could be addressed in a proactive way. The example I'll give, and it's one of many, is chronic disease and the cost of that to our healthcare system and to people's lives. If we started to educate students early on in their lives and reinforce that all the way through in terms of healthy lifestyle choices, healthy diet, that kind of thing, teaching them how to be healthy without, ending up with chronic diseases. Those are, in data, it's preventable chronic diseases. That's just one example, but I'm thinking there isn't enough emphasis on that preparation for all lives, all our roles in life. And another aspect of that is that it seems, and I'm not claiming that I know everything about this, but it seems like there aren't enough prepared teachers, and we end up sometimes having to take people who don't have all the preparation they need to be a good teacher. So we have to put more emphasis on teacher education And we don't even have that kind of a teacher ed program here at the university that prepares a teacher to help prevent some of these life-preventable problems.
Do you have a question that you would like them to answer?
So I want to say, first of all, I'm trying to draw some attention to this, but it's not all about job training to make us successful, to make society successful and people. So is that something that has been considered at all?
You want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of curriculum and what we teach is a school board decision in large part, right? I want to address, because there's a lot of things to address in there, and I think maybe teacher preparation is a question that Chris should handle. But what I will say to the point of like long-term disease is preventable. It is, but a big, huge issue that causes it is poverty. So it's not that children don't know what to eat, it's that children don't have access to what they need to eat, right? So I just want to point that out.
Well, I didn't mean that to in any way say it's all individual problems.
I believe the best of intentions from you, I really do. But I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
And I do think that there potentially is, how can we better prepare teachers? What can the program, what can the education program look like at the University of Wyoming? But also, the biggest issue is that we don't have teachers coming in. We don't have people that want to do this job because we don't value them enough, because we don't pay them enough, because we don't give them the things that they need to do their job. So what we need to do as your government is ensure that we are providing the mechanisms that make people want to be teachers, that inspire them to want to work with children. We don't do that when we do things like attack librarians and book ban. Right. Yeah. We don't inspire people to be teachers when we argue about whether they should be paid or if they're doing the right things by children and taking away their rights and trusting them. So we need a better system in place. We need to value the people that want to do this important work for us, and I think that is the key. It's a systemic cultural problem that exists right now. It's a political problem. We need our government to stop spewing rhetoric that isn't true.
I agree.
And we just need to support teachers, and we need to fund it adequately so that we can provide our constitutional right to a quality, equitable education in the state of Wyoming.
I'll just tack on the teacher education a little bit. The teacher education at the University of Wyoming has improved dramatically in recent years, and a lot of that has been due to feedback and concerns from the state community. I think our educator training at this point is exceptional, but that doesn't mean they teach them everything, because there are only so many hours in a day. And this is something that is a constant problem for the legislature. We want all things from teachers. We want all things from educators. We want them to be the parent of the kid. We want them to be their counselor and psychologist. We want them to be their educator. We want them to feed the child, which is essential also at this point in time for the reasons we just talked about. It is a challenge to achieve all of those things in a school day. And you end up having to prioritize. And we might have some imbalance in our priority. That is something that we empower the school boards to make those decisions, and they have the opportunity a lot of the time to address those things, but it comes back to what Representative Provenza was saying. We don't do a tremendous job in funding some of the things that need to be funded. So for programs like health and wellness, that is in our what we call our basket of goods. That's something that's supposed to be taught to every kid in the state of Wyoming before they graduate. But how that's realized, that certainly can vary based on curriculum. That's up to a district. But again, getting back to the how much time in the day, this is always a problem, and it always comes up. We see a bill every session or every couple of sessions that brings something that we ought to teach in school. And just about every time I see that bill, I think, yeah, we ought to teach that in school. What are we going to stop teaching to teach this in school? Right? What are they doing during the school day that we can cut out so that they can learn this? And therein lies the challenge. They do a tremendous job. Honestly, there's so much pressure on our teachers. There's so much pressure on our students at this point in time. It is a struggle. And we need to find ways to really lift up our teachers, to appreciate our teachers and how hard they work and what incredible service they provide to our communities. And we also need to make the lives of our kids more enjoyable, and so that we bring joy back to education. This is something that I've been passionate about for years. I want all of our kids to show up to school and love being there. And it's getting harder and harder to feel that way. But you should. You should show up to school, you should feel safe, you should feel a community, and you should love to be there for not just the sake of the education, but for the experience, the entire experience. And we should give that to every child, and we don't. And so, you know, the points that you're making, Ginny, are certainly a part of that for me.
And I think we had one more question here.
Sorry to go over time, but there were a number of bills in this legislative session, and there seem to be many on the horizon that are attacking the independence of the third branch of government, the judiciary. You touched on it a little bit, Representative Chestik, but what are you all going to do to protect the independence of the judiciary, which is critical in Wyoming and is embodied in our Wyoming Constitution, number one, and number two, to protect the checks and balances in Wyoming, because it does seem to be under attack right now.
So, I think you're right. The judiciary needs to be independent, right? It doesn't need to be controlled by one party or the other, because as soon as one party controls it, they think they got control, the other party will get in, and this pendulum swings. And that's not what you want from the judiciary. You want it to be right down the middle, interpreting the letter of the law, right? Whatever the law is, they're doing. They're not creating law, they're interpreting law. And we need to ensure that. The measure out there in front right now is, you know, it sounds good. We'll have Senate confirmation, right? That the Senate will do that. Problem is, in the state of Wyoming, we're a citizen legislature. And we would have to call a special session. We hear all about cutting the fat. We would have to call the legislature back in session to approve judges in the state. Well, you just don't call the Senate back into session, because our Constitution says the Senate cannot meet without the House. So now the House comes back into session too. And I can't guarantee, but I'm pretty sure as you do that, we will have other bills presented once we're in session. It just won't be confirmed these 5 judges or the Supreme Court justice or whatever. It'll be, we'll have a and we'll get into doing some other things. And so, Devin, I really believe we've got to do everything we can to follow the Wyoming Constitution, to make sure that it's independent. And like right now, the Senate confirmation, unless somebody can bring up an idea, we can't afford to do it. It's not in our Constitution. We've had a system where it's there. We all could probably pick out a judge or a justice here or there that we don't like, that isn't following. But the vast majority of our justices and judges are right here. And the other ones, there's a way out. We can vote them out. They come up for election, right? And we can vote them out. And so we need to make sure that we don't spend money where we don't need to spend it, and we need to make sure that we do have an independent judiciary out there.
I'll just tack on one thing real quickly. In Wyoming, we have the best system of any state. It is the envy of other states. I've had conversations with legislators that talk about their elected judges and how awkward it is for them to have a conversation with the judge where the judge says to a legislator, "Hey, I noticed you didn't support my re-election. What's that about?" That's awkward. I don't want to have that conversation at any point in my life, and I think we're very fortunate here. And if you're in Wyoming and the courts keep ruling against you, it's not the courts that are broken.
If I could just add a little bit, and this is on my radar, of course, because I'm on the Judiciary Committee. Some people say that I'm Pollyannish about this, but I actually am somewhat optimistic that we're going to be able to beat that one back. Where we have bad luck in the legislature is on the culture war issues. We lose those every time. But on good government stuff, we can sometimes win. And this is a good government issue. We need to have a good government, a good judiciary, a good strong judiciary system. And for example, the election bills, we killed a bunch of them, and that was a good government issue. We killed a bill in the House, it passed the Senate, we killed it in the House that would have made school board elections partisan, essentially. And that was a good government issue. We said, no, we don't want partisan politics in our school boards. Keep politics out of the school boards, and we killed it on the floor of the House. So I have hope that we are going to be able to recreate the coalition of good government supporters to hold the line and keep our judiciary safe. And I am optimistic about that, and I will continue to work on those issues and do the best we can. And anything that you all can do to support keeping the courts safe from politics, please help us out. We need to make it a public issue and keep that in the forefront.
One benefit of the budget session is the 2/3 requirement for introduction. As long as we can convince our colleagues that aren't part of the Freedom Caucus, I'll just say it, we can kill any effort to dismantle the judicial. But I don't even know if that's the point of what they're doing. They're trying to sow public distrust. And so the best way to inoculate that, to get in front of that, is to continue to talk about examples of how the judicial system has worked. Many times people don't talk about that. Nobody likes to be involved with the judicial system. It's not fun. Maybe it is for lawyers. They probably make a lot of money. Or maybe it's not fun at all. But one thing, I did research when I was at University of Wyoming getting my PhD on judicial legitimacy. And one of the fastest ways to make sure that you don't have public trust in your legal system is to put in an election in it. If people don't believe in the judicial system, it doesn't work anymore. And so would behoove and is critical that the people of Wyoming keep standing up and saying things. We saw a letter from people that were in the Bar Association, with people that are invested, talking to our federal delegation. We need more of that. We need more people standing up for saying, this thing actually works. This is one thing we don't have to fix. Let's just keep it the way it is.
Well, let's not break it. Yeah.
But we're only saved by the 2/3, I think, this session.
For this year,
but the next year. So what happens is you have the 2026 election. And we need help telling the public how harmful the decision-making has been in the Wyoming legislature. And 27% of people voted in the primary election. 27%. The people that are in charge of the Wyoming legislature right now received less than 10% of the voting population vote. 9% is not a mandate. That's the story we need to tell. And we need 27% more people on top voting in that election. And we probably won't be in the mess we're in now, where we have people from Washington, D.C. telling us what our job is here in Wyoming, and they have no idea what we do here. Yep.
Representative Sherwood a chance. Do you have anything you...
Just really quick, one thing we need to tackle, and I think we all can agree on, we have too many bills coming through the legislature, and many of them, if you heard, we had 10 on some subject coming up, and we had 29 on one subject going into this legislature. We've got to give our management council, which is the leadership in the House and the Senate, the ability to combine those bills into one bill that we can discuss, debate, and however it comes out, it comes out. But we've got to quit spending all our time on these hot topic, divisive topics that divide everybody, and spend the whole time on these 2 or 3 topics with many different bills. Combine them into one bill at the session, we can debate it, move on, and deal with things that we've all heard about. Schools, water, highways, things that matter in our state, and move beyond some of these hot, divisive issues and focus on how do we lift people up versus on how we divide ourselves with each other. So we've got to combine our bills.
That's unconstitutional.
What was that?
It's unconstitutional.
If you're referring to single subject, we can have a bill that, so with the 48 bills on elections, right, you can have a single subject there. I don't disagree that we don't want to look like Washington, D.C., where we have a bunch of different bills in there, but you can potentially talk about a lot of election, or like how we handle elections. Okay.
Well, if I meant multiple topics on topic A is a topic, topic B, topic C, they all get combined into A, B, and C buckets rather than 10 A topics, 10 B topics, 10 C topics. We're wasting our time. We're wasting your money, what we're doing.
All right, we will end it there. Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. We obviously could not get to every topic or concern in under 2 hours here, but don't let this be the end of your communication with your lawmakers. Some of these folks have newsletters, some of them have social media. I'm pretty sure all of them want constituent feedback, so definitely get in touch with them. But thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you to everybody who asked a question.
Thank you.